You are sitting by the window of a coffee shop in a gray, anonymous city in the Pacific Northwest. The rain is hitting the glass in a steady, monotonous rhythm. You take a sip of your black coffee. You are wearing a plain jacket. Your ID says your name is Arthur Vance. Your neighbors think you are a retired logistics consultant. You pay your taxes. You walk your rescue dog at exactly 7 in the morning. You exist in a state of absolute, unremarkable perfection. But you are not Arthur Vance. Arthur Vance is a ghost constructed by federal bureaucrats in a windowless room in Virginia. Every time you look at the empty chair across the table from you, you do not see the rain. You see Mateo. You always see Mateo. You and Mateo grew up on the exact same street. Like in a neighborhood where the pavement was cracked and the future was a luxury nobody could afford. You were two halves of the same survival mechanism. Mateo was the fire. He had the charisma, the loud laugh, the fearless eyes that made older men step back. You were the ice. You had the patience, the memory for numbers, the quiet calculation that saw 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Together, you were unstoppable. When you entered the organization, you did it side by side. You started at the very bottom, moving small packages of merchandise across the city borders. You protected each other. When a rival crew tried to corner you in an alley at 19, Mateo took a metal pipe to the ribs meant for you. He carried that scar for the rest of his life. You carried the debt. You built an empire together. By the time you were both 35, you were no longer moving packages. You were moving the entire market. Mateo became the face of the operation, the boss, the general who commanded absolute fear and absolute loyalty. You became the architect. You built the offshore accounts, the corporate shells, the supply chains that made the money look clean and the merchandise look invisible. You loved him like a brother, more than a brother. But love in this business is a vulnerability. And Mateo started developing a fatal condition: arrogance. He stopped listening to the math. He stopped playing by the unspoken rules of the geopolitical board. He decided that moving the usual product wasn't enough. He started utilizing your perfectly designed logistical routes to move specialized hardware. High-grade, restricted technology. He started dealing with foreign actors. Men from hostile states who didn't care about money but cared about destabilizing governments. You warned him. You sat in his extravagant mansion, surrounded by his armed guards, and told him that stepping into that specific market was a point of no return. You told him that moving that kind of merchandise attracts a different kind of attention, not the local police, not even the DEA. It attracts the intelligence community. It attracts the people who operate entirely in the shadows. Mateo just laughed. He poured you a glass of whiskey that cost $2,000 a bottle, patted your cheek, and said, "We are untouchable, brother. We own the shadows." He was wrong, and you knew he was wrong. The approach happened on a Tuesday. You were walking to your car in the underground parking lot of a legitimate corporate building you used as a front. The concrete echoed with silence. A man was leaning against the hood of your armored SUV. He wore a tailored gray suit and held a beige folder. He did not look like a cop. He looked like an accountant who decides the fate of nations. "We need to talk about the new business partners your friend is entertaining," the man said. His voice was perfectly flat. He didn't pull a weapon. He didn't show a badge. He just opened the folder and laid out your entire life on the hood of your car. He had satellite imagery of your secret warehouses. He had transcripts of your encrypted calls. He had the exact routing numbers of the trusts in Panama that you thought were buried behind a wall of digital concrete. He had it all. "Your brother has made himself a national security liability," the man said, looking you directly in the eyes. "The agency does not tolerate liabilities. The operation is going to be permanently resolved. The only variable remaining is whether you are in the blast radius." He offered you the ultimate mathematical equation. Option A, you stay loyal to Mateo. The agency dismantles the network. You both go to a black site, a place without a name, without a trial, and without a future. You simply evaporate. Option B, you provide the exact time and location of Mateo's next meeting with the foreign buyers. In exchange, the agency extracts you. Full immunity. A new identity, a safe, quiet life, far away from the fire. You had 48 hours to decide. Those 48 hours were a psychological descent into pure hell. You couldn't eat. You couldn't sleep. Every time your phone rang, your heart slammed against your ribs. You looked at Mateo during a strategy meeting the next day. He was laughing, confident, making plans for a future that was already erased. You looked at the scar on his neck, the one he got protecting you when you were kids. You felt a physical sickness in your stomach. Betraying him meant destroying the only family you had ever known. But dying with him meant ignoring the survival instinct that had kept you alive your entire life. In the underworld, loyalty is a beautiful concept, but survival is an absolute religion. You chose your religion. You made the call from a disposable phone. You gave the man in the gray suit the coordinates. The final night was a Friday. Mateo insisted you come to his private estate for dinner. Just the two of you. We like the old days. No guards in the room. Just expensive steaks, vintage wine, and the heavy weight of history between you. You sat across from him, smiling, sharing memories of the neighborhood, while a tracking device slightly larger than a grain of rice was active inside the heel of your left shoe. You were a walking beacon, guiding the apocalypse directly to his dining room. The dissonance was suffocating. You had to control your breathing. You had to make sure your hands didn't shake when you raised your glass. If Mateo saw the fear in your eyes, he would know. He was a predator. He could smell adrenaline from across a table. To us, Mateo said, raising his glass, his eyes full of genuine affection. To the boys from the cracked pavement who bought the world. To us, you replied. The wine tasted like ash. You knew the timeline. You knew that at exactly 11:30 p.m., the airspace above the estate would be quietly secured. You knew that teams of operators, men who do not exist on any official roster, were already moving through the tree line outside the perimeter. You had provided the security rotation schedules. You had given them the blind spots in the camera network. You had engineered the perfect breach. At 11:28 p.m., you excused yourself to use the restroom. That was the protocol. You walked down the long marble hallway. You stepped into the guest bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bathtub. You covered your ears and closed your eyes. At 11:30 p.m., the world ended. There were no sirens. There was no warning. The heavy oak doors of the mansion were breached with a muffled, suppressed concussive force. You heard the immediate, chaotic thud of heavy boots on marble. You heard the suppressed mechanical sounds of the perimeter guards being instantly neutralized. It was cold, surgical, and overwhelmingly efficient. This was not a police raid. This was a military-grade extraction. You heard Mateo shout your name. Not a shout of anger, a shout of concern. He was looking for you. He thought you were under attack. He was trying to protect you one last time. That shout broke something inside your soul that will never, ever be repaired. You stayed in the bathroom, staring at the tiles, frozen in the cowardice of your own survival. Minutes later, the handle of the bathroom door turned. The door opened. The man in the gray suit stood there, flanked by two operators in dark tactical gear. The man looked at you, nodded once, and said, "The package is secured. Oz, the liability is resolved. It is time to go." They walked you out through the living room. You tried not to look, but you couldn't help it. The room was destroyed. Mateo was on his knees, his hands bound behind his back with industrial zip ties. Two operators held him in place. His face was bruised, but his eyes were clear. When Mateo looked up and saw you walking freely alongside the man in the gray suit, you saw the exact moment his universe collapsed. He didn't scream. He didn't curse at you. He didn't fight the guards. He just stared at you with a look of absolute devastating comprehension. He realized that the man who built his empire was the exact same man who designed his cage. He realized that the brother he bled for had sold him to the shadows to save his own skin. You looked away. So you walked out the door and stepped into the back of a black SUV. You left your city, your history, and your soul behind. The transition was rapid. Flights on unmarked planes, debriefings in sterile rooms. You spent weeks answering questions, verifying accounts, mapping the rest of the network for the agency. You gave them everything they needed to completely dismantle what you and Mateo had built. You were the perfect informant. Then they gave you your new life. Arthur Vance, the Pacific Northwest, the modest house, the rescue dog, the absolute safety. And now, here you are, 5 years later, sitting in a coffee shop, watching the rain. You are safe. The agency kept its word. The cartel is a memory. Mateo is locked away in a federal supermax facility, sitting in a concrete box for 23 hours a day. Buried so deep under the earth that he will never see the sun again. He will never have a trial. He is simply gone. You have your freedom, but you quickly learned the ultimate truth about the Witness Protection Program. They protect your body. They do not protect your mind. You are a prisoner of your own memory. You cannot make real friends here, because making friends requires sharing your past, and your past is classified evidence. You cannot fall in love, because you are physically incapable of trusting anyone. You know exactly what betrayal looks like, because you perfected it. Every time you smile at a neighbor, you feel like a fraud. Every time you close your eyes, you see Mateo on his knees in the living room. Paranoia is your permanent shadow. You still check the rearview mirror. You still memorize the exits in every building you enter. You still wake up in a cold sweat at 3 a.m., wondering if the agency decided you are a loose end, or if some remnant of the old crew finally tracked you down. You traded a golden cage of wealth and power for a gray cage of silence and fear. You take another sip of your coffee. It is cold. You survived. You beat the game. You outsmarted the intelligence community and the underworld. But as you look at the empty chair across from you, the crushing reality settles into your bones. You survived, but you are not truly alive. You are a ghost, haunting your own existence. You betrayed the only person in the world who would have died for you, and your reward is an eternity of waking up every single morning, looking in the mirror, and knowing exactly what kind of monster is staring back.